Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
The countries are willing to come to the table right now. Mexico says they're going to. Let's see what they do. I'll be deeply involved in those conversations. Panama wants to come to the table and help the United States secure our border by shutting down the Darien Gap. This administration said they're going to do it. Secretary Mayorkas said he was going to do it. Panama never got any funding to do it. They never got anything done with this administration. They were coming to the table again. We will shut down the Darien Gap, but please help us. We will help them. Darien Gap, shutting the Darien Gap down would be a huge game changer on illegal migration to this country.
Winning the border wars. More War Monday is what it is today. And welcome to the Rob Maness Show. We're live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, and Roku. Today's President's Day, and we celebrate great presidents today, like George Washington, the father of our country, and Donald Trump, who I think is second only to George Washington, folks. Since before President Trump came into office, some reporting has indicated that the illegal alien flow through the Darien Gap and up through Panama and Mexico has dropped off dramatically, taking pressure off of border security forces in the United States. But is that reporting really accurate? Well, since coming into office, the president has also frozen foreign aid funding and has targeted specific United Nations organizations. But is it impacting the UN support of the illegal alien flow into the United States and funding to the non-governmental organizations, the NGOs, that have established and run camps in places like the Darien Gap and provide guidance to illegals on how to get to and into the U.S.? Well, the new administration has also deployed 10,000 troops to secure our southern border and has commitments from Mexico to increase enforcement on their side of the border. The Panamanian president, as you just heard, is committed to closing the Darien Gap and removing Panama from China's Belt and Road Initiative, too, possibly alleviating concerns primarily in the U.S. over the Chinese Communist Party having control over Panama's canal's operations. Well, my guest today is Michael Yan. Michael's known as America's most experienced combat correspondent, but most importantly to this show today, he's been reporting about these ops facilitating illegal immigration and aliens from the Darien Gap into the Panamanian jungles through the Panama Canal, and has reported on its operations too, and all the way to our southern border more than any other correspondent that I'm aware of. Michael, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's been too long, sir.
Hey, Rob. Thanks for having me back. I just got back from the Darien Gap. I'm actually in Panama City now. The canal is out my window here. And so, since Biden was installed, I've spent a good 8 months in Panama, about half of that time's in the Darien Gap. So I've really studied these. Now, keep in mind, Panama is not the only place I've been studying this. I've been studying it around the world. Like, I've been across the entire U.S. southern border from SpaceX to San Diego. It took months, right? I've been to the Canadian border. We have a border with Bahamas. Most people don't realize. There's a lot of other ways that people come through. For instance, a lot of Chinese will come through Mexico. They'll go to Cancun on vacation and then come up to the United States. There's many different flows that are coming in. And so I've been around the world in many countries, about 30 countries, just since Biden was installed, looking at this, right? So I have a frame of reference that's far different than most people who look at the borders. Most people who look at the border kind of stick to their zone, say Arizona, but I'm looking at this globally. And so now the Darien Gap, I was just back down in the Darien Gap. Like I said, I've spent about 4 months down there or so since Biden was installed. And I've been into all the major camps many dozens of times. I was just in some of those camps within this week. One's called Las Blancas. The flows are down by a good 95%. So the flows are very far down right now. That's great. Very important. The flows to another camp called Bajo Chiquito are far down. Another camp called San Vicente, that appears to be being readied for reverse flow. I was just at that camp as well. I've been in that camp. I've been in all these camps many dozens of times. So, I mean, I'm quite familiar. So I know what's normal and what's not normal here for the past 4. In fact, I was here in April of 2022 when Mayorkas came. I was physically here. I was waiting for him in the gap, and he landed right in front of me in 4 Blackhawks. Not actually in the gap, but in Darien Province at the edge of the Darien Gap. He landed right in front of me in 4 Blackhawks. I had waited for 4 days, and he went inside San Vicente camp, brought a bunch more money, and increased the size of the camps. Now, we know the names and much of the information about more than 1 million people that came in 2022, 23, and 24. We've got well over 1 million records of people that came through, including where they're from, their ages, their names, and a lot more. And those people mostly are in the United States now. These include, for instance, in 2023, more than 500,000 came through the Darien Gap. In 2023, there was more than 25,000 of those were Chinese. Page after page of Afghans, Bangladeshis, oh, good Lord, Venezuelans are a mile long. Oh, yes. But the Venezuelans, even though their passports will say Venezuela, it doesn't mean they're from Venezuela, because Iranians land in Venezuela and they get new passports. And actually, some Chinese land in Venezuela and get passports, and Vietnamese do too. So there's a lot of actually laundering that goes on, not just of money, but laundering of citizenships. And there's various ways that people launder their citizenships. One is, for instance, people will come in and get citizenship in Panama. There's ways to do it quickly, like you can invest in a teak farm, that sort of thing. And then from there, with a Panamanian passport, which is quite powerful, actually, you can then get another passport in a different country, right? Now you've got 2 different passports. So when you come into a country like the United States, nobody even knows who you are. But the bottom line is, we know well over 1 million came in just in 22, 23, and 24, just through the Darien Gap. That's just the Darien Gap, and that's just the people who actually checked in or in the records. Many people slipped by and never hit the records.
Yeah, the last time you talked to us was about 6 months after you met Mayorkas down there, I think, in either September or October of 23. Mr. Producer, put that picture up that Michael sent me. Michael, this is a picture that you sent me. You marked it up with a camp on it, with some camps on it and everything. And I wanted to just use this as a backdrop to our discussion about NGOs and how they're tied into the UN and this process of money that I think the president is starting to cut off. Am I accurate in that? And this picture is the one of the China camp with the HIAS. And then you have part of it marked Mayorkas, because I think he visited there. Go ahead.
Okay, this is important to unravel this. I made that image on the 11th of February, so 6 days ago, right? So that is, that's in Darien Province on the edge of the Darien Gap. So that the big white building there in the middle, that's a new hospital. It's not open yet, but they're working on it, right? Now, the
Right.
smaller thing at the 1 o'clock position, that is called San Vicente camp. That's the camp. That's what I call China camp. It's really more of a bus stop now. Huge amounts of Chinese come through there, Iranians. Mostly they come out of the jungle. They go into the records. They get on. You see the road up to that yellow circle where it says, "I stayed here for months," right? That's a hotel called Tenose Hotel, right? So that's where I stayed for months. And you can see the proximity to the camp. So all the buses that came into the camp and left the camp, I would see them. I have, I don't know, hundreds or maybe thousands of bus loads on video, right? Now, that the red circle, the small red circle is HIAS. That's the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Mayorkas was a board member at HIAS before he became the director of Homeland Security. So he was a board member. That the small red circle at HIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. Now they have operations all the way from Angola, different parts of Africa, South America, such as Colombia and Brazil, and up here in Panama. Yeah. And they've got another office not far from me here. They've got them up in Mexico. They've got them all through Central America. So that's the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. But they're one of the main pumps through the Darien Gap. Now, I want to repeat that. Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas was a board member on HIAS. So if you go to HIAS.org, HAIS.org, you will see that there's a letter congratulating Mayorkas for moving on up from HIAS to become the Director of Homeland Security. He then came down with the Commanding General of Southern Command, Laura Richardson, who's recently retired, and those 4 Blackhawks. He also came down with the U.S. Ambassador, Aponte, and they went into that camp. I was physically present. You can look online. They were publishing their own photos, and I did not meet him. I was just watching him and photographing and that sort of thing. And he brought more money and increased the size of the camps and the flows to the camps. Now, keep in mind, he came in 2022. The flow that year, I think, was 130,000 or so. And the next year was more than 500,000. And so the flows it's not just that camp. There's another major camp about 30 minutes drive away called Las Blancas, and I was just in that camp last week as well. And these 2 major camps are the major flows from the Darien into the up to the United States. And that in that video behind me is IOM. That's in Panama City. That's down the road from me in the City of Knowledge. That is those are our main enemies in the United Nations. I keep telling people on the Trump team.
We got to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about IOM in detail, Michael, because I watched one of your videos. I think this is a clip from it just last week and came across this. I was not aware that this organization was so heavily involved. So I'm very interested in the ties between it and the NGOs and then the United States government. We'll be right back with Michael Yon talking about winning the border war. Are we? We'll see. We'll be right back on the Rob Maness Show.
All right, we're in front of the IOM here in the City of Knowledge in Panama City. You've seen me here a few times in the last couple of weeks. These are the major scumbags running the invasions through the Darien Gap. This is the IOM. These are the guys that hand out the rape kits because so many men, women, and children get raped in the Darien Gap. We have some of those rape kits. They are actually containing abortion pills and that sort of thing. This is the United Nations. If President Trump is no kidding serious about closing off the invasions, he must defund these people. He must defund the United Nations. Anything less than that is unserious. So they need to be closed. And here's their security. No, go away, go away. We're going to take your office. They always come out because they know they're doing illegal stuff. Call your security. And they know they're doing illegal stuff, and they don't need to be here. They need to be closed down. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday. And are we winning the border wars? I think we are, but we have to solidify the gains and institutionalize those gains. And my guest today is Michael Yon, the man you just saw right there. There's a much longer video where he takes you through the description of the location he's at. and some other things that are critically important for Americans to understand. And Michael, you were standing in front of this headquarters building of this International Organization for Migration, and they work for the United Nations. Do they work for UNRWA, UNWRA, the refugee agency under the United Nations, or are they a direct line to the headquarters?
Well, this video that I made, and this is right by the canal. The Panama Canal is right behind that office. Like you can, on the left there where you see that space, that's the canal, right? And so this is the former U.S. Army South headquarters, right? This is former Fort Clayton, for those who know about Panama. This is Fort Clayton. Now they call it the City of Knowledge. They call it Ciudad de Saber, City of Knowledge. Now, I called it OIM, and some people correct me because I call it IOM, but in English it's IOM, in Spanish it's OIM, right? So it doesn't matter, same thing. So if you're in an airport and you see somebody with a white bag with blue letters or a blue bag with white letters and it says IOM or OIM, you're probably looking at migrante, right? Invaders, because they actually hand out those bags with their name on it. I think they've reduced the amount that they hand those bags out, but you can see them in airports still. And I see them in airports around the world, whether it's Schiphol Airport or in Turkey or wherever, El Salvador, I see them everywhere, Mexico. So, I mean, the bottom line is, and you can see them in Texas. Go to McAllen, Texas, for instance, in the airport, you can see them. And so, yeah, United Nations, we have to shut them down. I've told that to Tom Homan. I've been told that he's doing very hard work. Mike Flynn told me a week or two ago, he said, Homan's doing very good work. He looks very tired. He's working so hard. And the bottom line is, I tell them all, as much as I talk bad about Trump, I support what he's doing 100% closing the border. I hardly sleep trying to help close the border, right? And what we have to do, we have to shut down the United Nations. Now, cutting off the funding to U.S. aid, great, 100%. Keep at them. I mean, get your teeth in them and rip all that flesh apart. But we've got to do the same with United Nations. And United Nations is a much bigger enemy than U.S. aid. U.S. aid is a huge enemy, don't get me wrong. But United Nations is much more substantial on many, many fronts that most people are not going to be aware of unless you've studied these guys for a long time. But bottom line, one of the main enemies that we have in the world, besides Chinese Communist Party, is United Nations. And I mean, they are of that level. I mean, they are literally of the level of CCP. I know that sounds over the top, except for that 1% of the people who actually, or 1% of 1% who've studied United Nations enough, and they realize they are a lethal threat to the United States. They're the ones who are running most of the invasions of Europe, United States, Japan, and they are doing it in Japan. And, I was over in El Salvador last year with Masako Ganaha, and we were up in, where else? In Honduras and Guatemala and all those places. But we saw IOM had an office with the Canadian Embassy in El Salvador. IOM and Canadian Embassy in the same building. We then went up to Guatemala, and it was the same thing in the same building, right? IOM and Canadian. Then we flew up to Canada, and IOM is just totally involved in destroying Canada. Canada's a dead man walking. You go over to places like Luxembourg in Europe, dead. You go over to Ireland, which we did. We spent a substantial amount of time going around Ireland looking at this. They have crossed in Ireland the demographic Rubicon. They have crossed it. We've mapped out all those camps in Ireland. It's unbelievable. They are thoroughly invaded. Netherlands, I know the Dutch people, as much as I love you, they get upset. Sometimes I leave Panama and I fly to Netherlands. Netherlands is also vital terrain. A lot of people don't get that. Netherlands is thoroughly invaded. They shut down Groningen gas field, just as I warned may happen. It has now happened. Masako and I warned in advance many times that we thought Nord Stream would be shut down. We even went to BASF plant twice before Nord Stream was shut down, saying something may happen to Nord Stream. The second time we went was 14 days before the attack on Nord Stream, and we're like, we think something could happen to Nord Stream. This is all related. This isn't separate stuff. You know, it takes a while to unravel it, but as you know, the things that we're looking at, where I'm sitting right now is one of the most important pieces of land on planet Earth. The Panama Canal is right out my window, right? And the Chinese have ports on both ends of it We got to get rid of these guys. Now, who helps them do all this stuff? United Nations. United Nations took over our headquarters. They took over our U.S. Army South headquarters down the road from me, Southcom, not U.S. I mean, they've taken the whole thing. It's UNHCR, it's IOM, it's the Clinton Foundation. It's more than 63. There was 63 last time we mapped them out, and now there's others that have been added on, including vaccine research. Yeah, right down the road, right here, right next to the Panama Canal.
All these things aren't linked? No. That's why I wanted to interview you, because, you're sitting right there at the Panama Canal. When we started communicating again a couple of weeks ago, you said you were headed that way. So the president has defunded 3 specific UN organizations. One is UNWRA. And the reason I asked if there was a linkage between that and IOM is because IOM has given pink slips, fired 3,000 of its 22,000 workers. And I was just wondering if that funding is linked, or if that was a USAID link or some other type of link, because something has happened with them. The president's turned some kind of spigot off, but it's not enough if they're only firing 3,000 out of 22,000.
In November, right after Trump was elected, before inauguration, of course, we went down to Buenos Aires, right? Masako Ganaha and I, and we walked in to the IOM headquarters in Buenos Aires, and we asked for a job. I mean, you never know. They might say, sure, here's the computer. Yes. But they said no. Actually, they have a hiring freeze because President Trump just got elected. And so this was November. Yeah. Masako and I were just like, really? And they're like, and you can't apply for a job here in Buenos Aires. You have to apply for it back in your home country or in Switzerland. But actually, Masako went to their office in Switzerland as well. That's the main office. But the main leader of IOM for American operations, this hemisphere, is in New York, and her name is Amy Pope. She's American. Amy Pope should be arrested. You can look at her on Twitter. I mean, she's a human trafficker, straight up, right? And so what we need to do. I was talking with one of the Department of Homeland Security guys. A lot of the people on Homeland Security are very serious. They're serious Americans, and they're hardcore. And then there's others that are just straight up hardcore losers, right? I was talking with one of the loser sorts, and he's like, well, we can. I said, we need to not only defund United Nations wholesale, like stop studying it. There's nothing more to study. Cut it all, right? Did you study every Nazi platoon before you decided to attack? No, you just take them out, right? It's got they're in that formation. Take them out, right? And that's what we need to do. And I said specifically, in addition to defunding them, we need to start prosecuting vertically. We need to, from bus drivers, so that level knows that they'll be prosecuted, all the way up to Amy Pope and the funding people and the people that are helping operate these things as well. And this one of the loser sorts, he's like, no, we can't go against Amy Pope because she might have friends and we will make enemies. I'm like, might make enemies? Are you joking? They're destroying our country. We have enemies. Yeah. Let's get them. They're getting us. Let's go, boys. You know what I mean? Throw that guy off the aircraft carrier. Next airplane up, launch. You know what I mean? This is how we have to roll. I'm told that Tom Homan is like this. He's like, let's go get him, and hopefully he'll come down to Darien Gap. And he said that he's interested in doing it. I'll certainly take him. I'll stop everything I'm doing. I'll pull in my whole team. I'll make sure that all the briefings are there. He gets the right helicopters at the right time. And he'll be out with the Panamanian. The Panamanian government definitely wants him to come down. And they tell me all the time, where's Tom Homan? Where's the other guys? They want the U.S. government down here, and they want them right now. Not just to take the canal. They want help closing the Darien Gap.
Yeah, that's something that I'm very interested in, is the relationship between the Panamanian government and all these NGOs, the UN, the people that are getting away with this crazy crap. Well, Michael, we got to take another break. When we come back, we'll talk some more about this and talk about the numbers, because Holman, he spit out a number this morning of 229 crossings on the southwest border in just the last 24 hours, and there were 11,000 plus at this time last year under Biden. So something's changing, but how real is it? That's the big question. And then we'll get to some questions from the audience here when we get right back on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Murray, I don't think there's ever been a more sudden and swift change in any government operation than under President Trump when he took the oath of office. I would say overnight, but on the first hour of his tenure as president, we saw the change where there were military sent to the border. The military were blocking people from crossing the border illegally. The numbers of people who crossed on the 19th of January dropped dramatically on the 20th of January. They have continued to drop, and every single day, President Trump, working with Tom Homan, they've been deporting people to the countries they came from. But to show how Texas is a partner in all this process, on the hour that President Trump took office, Texas was deploying more buoys in the Rio Grande to deter and deny illegal entry into the country. The change, Maria, is this. We suddenly now have a commander-in-chief who cares about national security, who cares about securing the border, who's going to enforce the law. And importantly, he has a governor in a state in Texas that will be a partner with the Trump administration. We will assist in the arrest, the detention, and the deportation of people coming across the border illegally.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're talking about winning the war on the southern border. That's what we've got to do, is win this, and that was Governor of Texas, Greg Abbott. I'd like to have seen that enthusiasm, Michael Young's my guest today, from the governor before the president took office, because I knew there was more he could do with the state of Texas, but he just wasn't doing it. That's one of the frustrations I have. When you have these regular politicians types, they don't get the time we're in. And the time we're in is that action is necessary. Action now is necessary, not waiting until Donald Trump gets reelected.
Dirtball clown. And this is why I don't have any friends, because the bottom line is, I was saying this about Abbott before he was elected last time, because I saw the things that he was doing. I was I was across the entire Texas border. I spent months on the Texas-Mexican border, and then across the entire U.S. border, all the way through New Mexico and Arizona and in California, up in Canadian border. I've been watching this a lot. So it's very hard to bullshit me about what's going on the border. Very hard, right? I've got too many contacts. I've got too much experience on it. And Abbott, he was lying straight up. I mean, he was, for instance, doing his little press conferences on the border, unfolding the Stacheldraht, as they call it in German. What do you call it in English? Concertina, right? Unfolding that stuff on the border and showing how they're, catching the invaders there. Just down like a half mile away, my drone's in the air watching them come across. It's like, come on, and so and then he starts, busing them up to places like New York or wherever else he was busing them. And my friends in Texas, where I love Texas, I spend a lot of time in Texas, and I'm going to head back there soon. But my friends in Texas are like, see, he's busing them to New York. He's sending them to Massachusetts or wherever. He's showing them. I'm like, no. He's clearing the decks. He's opening, he's pulling them into our heart. New York is America, right? Massachusetts is the United States, right? He's just clearing the Rio Grande banks of the Rio Grande, and more are coming in. Push them back to Mexico, right? Abbott is not our friend. Abbott is World Economic Forum, full stop. He's a globalist. He is the Texas sector chief for the World Economic Forum. He needs to go, right? We need somebody else that's more serious. Now, every time I've said that, people would say, who do you want? Beto? Of course not. Beto is something you step on the sidewalk, right? But Biden and Abbott are not much better. They're not better at all, obviously. They're the same thing. Some just dress better, right? So the bottom line is we got to take out United Nations. I mean, take them out by the roots. They're doing a lot more to us than just the invasions. They're also going after, as example, Diego Garcia is our strategic base out there in the Indian Ocean. United Nations is trying to get Diego Garcia turned over, let's say, to Mauritius from being a British protectorate, and which means basically China is the bottom line, right? So that, I mean, I could go on for hours about the things that United Nations is doing that are not involved with actual migration, but are involved with destroying the United States and destroying Europe and destroying Canada, right? And Japan. You know, United Nations has a huge university in downtown Tokyo. I was just at it last year. It's like Gotham City type stuff in downtown Tokyo. They're destroying Japan. They're actually destroying Thailand, although my Thai friends don't realize it yet. We were just over there looking at that again. There's reasons why they're doing it. But the bottom line is United Nations must go. The number one funder of the United Nations is United States. So when you see the flows of IOM coming through into the United States or Canada or Japan, all these different places, IOM has 2 offices in Bangkok, just in Bangkok. That doesn't include Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, and all these other places, right? They've got offices in Tokyo. They've got offices all over the place. They are destroying Ireland. Ireland is essentially a dead man walking at this point. IOM, United Nations, just broaden this out. Forget IOM. Broaden it out to United Nations. You got to take them out. You're a military man. What do? Concentrate fire. Concentrate fire and effort. Take the machine gun out, and then start taking them out in detail, right? So first take out United Nations, and then we go after whatever is left to clean up. We concentrate fire on each of them, like HIAS. HIAS has initiated a lawsuit less than 2 weeks ago in Washington State, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, because their funding's been cut. So that funding cut apparently came to the U.S. aid vector, right? So many of these shutting U.S. aid is great. Took one out. Now we got to take out the big boy. United Nations got to go.
I think the president actually stopped all federal funding to all non-governmental organizations until they could be adequately reviewed. So Catholic Charities is probably hurting too, since they're another big player in all this mess. Let's take some questions from the audience. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Catholic Charities, for instance, we looked into them in Florida. At that time, this was about 3 years ago, I think they had 12 or maybe 16 different incorporations there just in Florida. So it'll say Catholic Charities, but there's many different Catholic Charities. But I've been to Catholic Charities in Texas, quite a few other places, and also down in Mexico. Catholic Charities, like IOM, like HIAS, every time you approach them, they're all hidden and sometimes quite aggressive because they know they're doing dirt. Catholic Charities at McAllen, Texas, they got what's it called? Anzadulas Park, whatever. I've been to it many times. But they took over the entire park. And every time you approach it, they come at you like you're trying to rob Fort Knox, which apparently has been robbed. I don't know about that. Separate story.
Well, I think they get about $500 million a year from our tax dollars, coffers. Let's take some questions from the audience. Shell is our host over there. Go ahead, Shell.
We have Bishop, sir.
Yes, Jan. Well, I was following the Declaration of North America. When you ran across that document and once you read it, were you just as shocked, or what was your first impression when you didn't hear anything about it from the mainstream media or the Republicans?
The first time I heard about the DNA, the Declaration of North America, was from Ann Vandersteel. She's one of my team members, my chief team member on Operation Burning Edge. She helped me expose Colony Ridge after Todd Bensman alerted us to it. Now you see Colony Ridge all in the news and this sort of thing. That was Operation Burning Edge, thanks to Todd Bensman. But Ann Vandersteel kept telling me about this DNA, Declaration of North America. And I don't know if you know Ann Vandersteel, but once she starts educating you on something, you're going to hear about it like 50 times until it sinks in, right? You know, she's like a drill sergeant. Yeah. And so, and you realize how serious it actually is, right? Mm-hmm. Ann Vandersteel is an important one to talk with about the DNA, the Declaration of North America. It's quite serious.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just met her last Thursday evening when I was down in Florida at an event. Her and her husband, and I'm going to get her on the show because they're doing a lot of work in Western North Carolina now, exposing the FEMA corruption, the state government not doing what it's supposed to do, and those kind of things. Do you think this, Holman, throughout the last 24 hours, only 229 illegals have come across the whole southwestern border, as opposed to 11,000, a day under Biden, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you know this border better than anybody, Michael. Is that a realistic assessment? I mean, where's he coming up with that number? It seems really low to me. Not that I don't like Tom Homan. I love him. I love what's going on. I'm ecstatic about it. I've been running on this issue as a politician in campaigns for 10 years now, securing this border and stopping this mess. But is that a realistic viewpoint as far as what our expectations should be at this point, or is this just some fluke number that it's going to level out somewhere else unless the next step is taken and completely pull funding from things like IOM?
Well, that's a good question, because that's the first time I heard the 229 number, but with just a few phone calls, I can audit my, I've established networks all across on the Mexican and the U.S. side, so it's easy for me to do a sort of a straw poll audit of people that are there constantly. And it sounds a little low. I will say this, it's very clear that the numbers are dramatically lower. That much, that's truthful. Yeah. But that number, obviously, I'm in no position to say if that's truthful or not. And of course, Tom he's going to have to take somebody's word for it as well. And when I was on the Texas border so long, they took down those aerostat balloons at one point. I think they put some of them back up, but the aerostats were very important as well. You know how the aerostats are used in Iraq and Afghanistan and whatnot. And for whatever reason, the Biden administration took those things down. I think they were taking out our eyes, basically. But the bottom line is that's a huge border. And keep in mind, there's also the Bahamas border, which they come up on to Florida. And also there is the border with Canada, which is substantial. Like I was up on that Canadian border last year with Misako Ganaha as well, and that's more than 5,000 miles, that border. And the border goes both ways in Canada. And now one thing that's very important, and I think it's very important, is if we start to incarcerate some of these people, like send them down to the prisons in El Salvador, and people see video of them frog walking, with the other guys, a lot of people, I think, will self-deport, because they can deport on their own terms or they can deport on our terms, right? We have to encourage self-deportation. 1,000 a day is nothing. That's nothing to me. If you're not doing 500,000 a month, you're not even in the ballpark. Yeah. And I mean per month, and we can do it. That means either deporting or causing that many to self-deport. And it can be done. For sure it can be done, because 500,000, more than 500,000 came up just through the Darien in 2023. And that's through some of the toughest jungle in the world, right? So we know that we can get that many out.
Well, have you seen any projections on the self-deports? I mean, I'm hearing about it, and Mr. Holman talks about it quite a bit. He doesn't really throw any hard numbers out, but he thinks that there's been a huge number of self-deports, but he's only able to report actually what they're actually deporting on our airplanes or other people's airplanes and those kind of things that are coming through there. Is there any estimate out there?
There's no way on planet Earth that they're doing any substantial numbers on airplanes. I mean, you know what I mean? We would notice that. I mean, flight tracker. I mean, you know what I mean? It would be seen at airports and that sort of thing. I mean, you really have to do it by ship or that sort of thing. I mean, there's just so many, or cause self-deportations. Because remember, I mean, at times we had 10 or even 20,000 come through in a day across the southern border, right? So, and this went on for years, right? And so, deporting 1,000 people, that's like taking a tablespoon out of the Panama Canal, I mean, we've got, and we can do this. I mean, we can, we can people have told me, so many people have said we can't close the Darien Gap. I'm like, you need to just hush up. A good captain, a sharp captain who's enabled can shut the Darien Gap. It's easy. You got the Darien Gap on your side. I mean, you know what I mean? I mean, if I were to design an obstacle, it would be the Darien Gap, right? Because it's not like it's some creek or river.
It's not just a river crossing. I mean, you're talking about a couple hundred miles of dense jungle, right? I mean, it's a big area.
A good 60 miles, and I mean the mountain of death you got to cross, and all these, and the bottom line is then you've got to come up Highway 1, and they come up one lane and go over many bridges, and finally they go over the Thatcher Ferry Bridge, which is right out my window, right by Bridge 4. We call it the Chinese Bridge. It's being built now. They go over that bridge, and then it's a whole linear ambush. I mean, there's no reason in the world, and also, case in point, during the COVID lockdowns, nobody got through the Darien Gap for about a year. They locked them down. So nobody got through. Yeah. They just didn't let them through.
That's right.
The only reason that they get through is because IOM and the United States and all these HIAS and all these other people, I want to be crystal clear with what I just said. That was not a misstatement. United States is the chief funder of United Nations. And it was the United States who came down to the Darien Gap and helped the flows. Mayorkas physically came down. Exactly. I was physically present when he did it on April 18th, 2022, and got the footage. And they published their own footage, right? He's inside China camp. They published their own footage, as did I, right? And he promised the Panamanian government more funding to help them get through. And then you'll see my footage before he was there and footage after, and all the camps grow.
Yeah. Well, we got to take our last break, Michael. When we come back, I want to shift to the Panama Canal, the Chinese, the Panamanians, and that relationship there, and see how things are going to change specifically, because you're right there watching ships go through there, and you understand what's going on. We'll be right back with Michael Yon on the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday, and we're talking winning the Southern Border War.
Currently in the control center of the Agua Claras locks at the Panama Canal. So this is the Atlantic side. This is active. 2 ships passing through right now. This is not your average tour, let's put it that way. This is not controlled by Chinese. This is all Panamanian run. And we're here, we're in the control center, all run by Panamanians. There's about 300 ship pilots, about 12 are American, and all the rest are Panamanian. And then there's about 150 tugboat captains. See, that's a tugboat in front of the ship. So this ship, the giant ship in front of us, is being piloted by a super highly trained. It can take 14 years to get all the training, to get the top level training to be able to pilot these ships. So in other words, even when the U.S. Navy comes through with aircraft carriers or whatever, they have to be piloted by actual
Panama Canal ship pilots because this is just so dangerous and it takes so much skill.
Hey, do you guys want to go outside on the balcony?
Yeah, we're going to go out on the balcony then.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday here on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast. And my guest is combat correspondent and cameraman Michael Yon, who has been studying this issue, not just in Panama and the United States and Canada, but all around the world, of refugees, illegal immigration, migrant flows, terrorism, and the overcoming of the Panama Canal by the Chinese communists. That's been going on steadily and slowly, plugging along for years and years and years through their Belt and Road Initiative. And Michael, that footage was fantastic. I had not seen it before. What I really liked is that you're talking about who's controlling in this control room. Now, that's the Atlantic side lock, if I understood it correctly. And it's the Panamanians that are in charge of that. How does this control of the ports that the Chinese communists have gained at either end of the canal interact and interoperate with the Panamanians in the process of getting a ship through that lock?
We walked in and they actually let us up there. You can't make up the stuff. So we actually, I mean, there's no tourists get to go through there. And actually, Masako Ganaha, oh yeah, and at one point that ship that you saw as it got closer into the locks, they actually let Masako Ganaha open the locks or close the lock. Yeah, it was just 2 mouse clicks, and it was unbelievable. But anyway, the Panamanians, keep in mind, they don't really look at us in general as friends or as enemies. They look at us more like cousins. You know what I mean? Like, I feel very welcome in Panama, more like a family member, actually. You know what I mean? It's not like I feel when I'm in Germany or something. I've been to 99 countries. You know what? I spend most of my life in other countries, right? But in Panama, I feel like it's just kind of, I don't know, kind of home, you know? And so the Panamanians, there's a lot of Panamanians. If Trump does this right, it's very clear that a lot of Panamanians actually want us to take the canal back. It's just a matter of how you do it, right? It's just a matter of like coming in like family versus coming in like the 82nd Airborne, right? You know what I mean? And so, but I you know what I mean? I really think I ask them all the time. I ask them constantly, like, and a lot of them are like, hey, it was a lot better when Americans were here. Why don't you? You won't believe how many Panamanians have complained to me in the last 4 years. Like, where did America go? Why are we dealing with Chinese all the time? Why don't you come back? Yeah. And they're angry that we've abandoned them. You know what I mean? You know, like they're like like when I talk with them about the 4th bridge that's being built right now. I mean, it's over there actually, and and this, we call it the Chinese bridge because it's the Chinese bridge. But you ask the Panamanians, and they're saying, why didn't you bid on it? Why didn't any American companies bid on it? Now, there might be reasons for that. We've now learned more about why there might be no bids, because there is a lot of corruptions here, corruption, and the you know, the Americans up until now, I think, up until Trump just came in, we've not been allowed to bribe foreigners in foreign countries, right? You know, this is a law. I don't know when that law came into effect, but it was several generations ago, right? For the corrupt, what's the name of that law? You know what I'm talking about. I've had to deal with it myself at times in Poland and places. But the bottom line is China can come in and bribe all they want and do everything that they want and get the bids and do kickbacks and that sort of thing. But if Americans do that, you can end up going to jail, right? And so, right. But now, if you're going to level the playing ground, you're going to have to level a lot of things. And but we need to get rid of the Chinese, period. Now, the Chinese do not run the canal. That's just false. But do they have ports on both ends of the canal? Yes, they do, 100%. Could they close the canal? Absolutely, easily. They could have. They can close it without having any ports there as well. This is not hard. You know, I've got these books that I just bought yesterday. Two of them were from 1913. One of them's from 1909, and it's all about building the canal. Of course, the canal opened in 1914, and even back then, security was a huge matter. The day the canal opened always was about security. A lot of people come and they look at the canal and they're like, they think that they came up with some idea that our great grandfathers didn't come up with way back when. Like, we had huge 16-inch guns right over here, like a few generations ago. You know what I mean? They're like, no kidding, you could shoot from this end of Panama all the way to the other end. You know what I mean? It's like, I mean, to the other side of the Atlantic. So, but what I'm getting to is security has always been a problem, and we know that. But keep in mind, the Chinese also have a lot of interest in our ports in Los Angeles and San Francisco, all over the United States. They have a big port right off the coast of Florida we went to last year in Bahamas. Literally, China has a big port in the Bahamas right off the coast of Florida. Antigua, on and on and on and on, right? So if we're going to use the Monroe Doctrine, which we should, we need to get on it. And that means there's going to be a lot. This is going to be this is not going to be cleaned up in 10 years. Let's put it that way. But we need to get on it and start scrubbing. And the first place to really seize back our influence and control is the Panama Canal. But it's not just Panama Canal. It's this Panama itself. The more you learn about Panama, the more you'll realize why people like Einstein visited here. Everybody who is somebody has studied Panama and Panama Canal. This is one of the most interesting places on earth, and the people who live here don't even seem to realize it mostly, and Americans have forgotten that, right? For so many reasons, like there's a huge copper mine not far from me, which is very important. The rivers run with gold here. I mean, there's old poems about how pure the gold is here, silver, so many different reasons. Panama is a big fat sheep with a big fat juicy pork chop around its neck, and somebody's going to take it. It needs to be.
We should make it.
Keep it in the family.
We should make it the 51st state instead of Greenland. And I understand Greenland, Canada, I'm totally opposed to, but because it's too leftist.
Some Panamanians.
I get it, but Panama would be fantastic.
Some Panamanians tell me that. Some Panamanians go, no, we want to keep independence, but we want to keep a good relationship. And others are like, yeah. You know who always wants to be, every time I go to Philippines, they're like, when are you going to make us a 51st state? Filipinos, and Americans, we get along very well. And I say, listen, I love Philippines, and the moment we make you a state, you're going to go to war with us within 1 year. When all the Americans come in with the IRS and the restaurant inspections and stuff, you're going to start blowing up our buses. You know what I'm saying?
They'll be remembering why they kicked us out in the first place.
Exactly.
Well,
I'm like, no, Philippines is not going to be a state.
The interesting thing is that the largest immigrant population in Panama itself is Chinese military-age males, and then the tens of thousands, maybe even 100,000 Chinese military-age males that have come in through the southern border. They got to be interested in something, because nobody leaves China either without permission or without escaping, and I can't believe they've let that many people escape. Their security's better than that.
Let me tell you something. This is important. In 2023 alone, more than 500,000 people came through the Darien Gap. More than 25,000 of those, and I can prove this, were Chinese. More than 25,000. Yeah. And that would not include Chinese who may have gotten Venezuelan passports or whatever, because they will just present the paperwork and it will be accepted, right? But 25,000 under who self-identified or had Chinese identification. More than 25,000 came through just the Darien Gap. And most of the Chinese who come to the United States don't go through the Darien Gap. Most of them take vacations to Mexico first, like Cancun, or they come on student visas, or they come through Canada and that sort of thing. So just through the Darien Gap in 2023 alone, more than 25,000, we've got their names, we got their ages, we got everything.
Amazing. But are we doing anything with it? The terrorism problem. I'm watching what Sarah Adams talks about with the Islamists that have made their way. And just very concerned that there is going to be a culmination point, and we're going to have some internal combat happening here with all of these groups probably working together. Well, Michael, thank you so much for spending so much time with us today. We appreciate it. Tell folks how they can find you. And I hope you'll invite me to be part of the team when Holman comes down there, because I'd love to make a trip with you and Ann and get the brief in the background while Holman's getting his briefing.
As soon as I get off the phone with you, I'm going to be calling up some of those people. But if you want to come, I would say pack your bags, because it could be on very short notice. I might not be able to give you much notice.
You just let me know.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. That was Michael Yon, folks. You can find him on X. Follow him. Very important. The most informative individual in reporting on a consistent basis of this entire problem. Other networks, they send reporters out periodically, but Michael's on this case the whole time. Well, tomorrow's Training Tuesday, and we'll be talking to Tim Jensen, who is the CEO of the Grunstyle Foundation, who's made a lot of recommendations to the new Secretary of the VA, Doug Collins, about veteran suicide programming, and we've got a lot to talk about with him. I'm very excited to get a chance to talk with him. I've known him for a long time, ever since I got into politics over 10 years ago. Until then, I'm Rob Maness on Worldview Tube.
You're watching Worldview 2, built on the 35 years of Worldview books, documentaries,